Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in life when staying visible, constantly explaining yourself, defending your choices, and proving your worth becomes exhausting. It's the moment you realize that disappearing isn't about running away. It's about choosing peace over performance, silence over noise, and self-respect over public approval. When you disappear, you stop chasing the version of yourself that others want to see, and you start living in the truth of who you really are. There's a narrative we've been sold all our lives that to step back, to remove yourself, or to stop engaging means you've given up. That walking away is a sign of fragility, cowardice, or surrender. But that narrative was built to keep us on the battlefield, constantly proving something to someone who may never care. Disappearing is not weakness. It is the quiet declaration that you will no longer fight wars that have nothing to do with your growth. It is the understanding that that strength is not measured by how much noise you can make, but by how much peace you can protect. Sometimes the bravest act is not to stand your ground in the middle of chaos, but to step out of the arena altogether. When you disappear, you shift from reacting to choosing. The world thrives on reaction. Instant replies, quick comebacks, heated arguments. But wisdom whispers that not every moment deserves your presence. Disappearing is the choice to preserve your energy, to hold your power close instead of scattering it across meaningless confrontations. You begin to recognize that every interaction either builds you or drains you, and that the cost of constant exposure is far greater than the reward of fleeting validation. In this retreat, you find clarity not because you ran from the storm, but because you had the foresight to step out before the flood drowned you. In the quiet space created by disappearing, you start to hear yourself again. You notice the subtle aches you had ignored while performing for the world. You begin to remember what peace feels like without the constant noise of opinions and demands. The absence of the crowd reveals truths that are impossible to see in the spotlight. You realize that many of the battles you fought were never yours to begin with. You start questioning why you were even in certain rooms, speaking in certain conversations, defending yourself against accusations that didn't deserve an answer. The more you reflect, the more you see that disappearing is not avoidance, it's alignment. There's also a deep humility in disappearing. It takes courage to admit that you don't have to be everywhere for everyone at all times. The ego wants to stay visible, to prove it's still relevant, still wanted, still strong. But wisdom knows that real strength doesn't always seek an audience. Disappearing is the ego's quiet defeat and the soul's great victory. You choose to walk away, not because you can't handle it, but because you no longer want to live in spaces that constantly demand you prove your worth. You refuse to play a game where the rules keep changing and the prize is never peace. And in this act of stepping back, you also remove the fuel from fires that were never meant to burn in the first place. Every drama, every conflict, every argument needs energy to survive. And if you're not there to feed it, it eventually dies. Disappearing is the silent withdrawal of that energy. Without your presence, the noise loses volume, the chaos loses direction, and the people who once thrived on your reaction are left holding their own mess. You learn that sometimes your absence speaks louder than your presence ever could. You don't have to win the argument. You simply have to stop showing up for it. Finally, disappearing teaches you to live for yourself instead of for the crowd. When you stop being constantly visible, you realize how much of your life was shaped by the expectations of others. You were performing without knowing it, curating your responses, managing your image, keeping the mask in place. But when you retreat into your own space, you can finally take the mask off. You can rest without worrying about being misunderstood. You can breathe without rehearsing your next line. Disappearing gives you back the most precious thing you can ever own: your life on your terms. We live in an age that treats silence like a void to be filled. People rush to respond, to defend, to clarify, often without even thinking about whether the response is worth giving. But silence is not emptiness, it is strategy. It's the understanding that not every attack requires a counterattack, not every question requires an answer, and not every invitation to conflict deserves your RSVP silence, is your refusal to play the game on someone else's terms. When you choose silence, you are not surrendering, you are standing so firmly in your truth that you don't need to prove it. The beauty of silence is that it shifts the power dynamic. In conflict, people expect engagement. They expect you to fight, to explain, to participate in their chaos. When you withhold that participation, you take away the very oxygen the conflict needs to survive. This is why silence feels so unsettling to those who want control, because without your reaction, they have nothing to work with. They are left to sit with their own words, their own choices, and their own discomfort. Silence can be the mirror that forces people to face themselves without the distraction of your voice. Choosing silence also protects your energy. Words are costly. Every sentence you speak takes something from you: time, emotion, attention. When you argue with someone determined to misunderstand you, you pay that cost over and over with nothing in return. Silence is how you close the account. It's a boundary that says, I will not invest my voice in a conversation that's not worth having. Instead, you keep that energy for things that actually build you, your healing, your relationships with people who listen, your dreams, your peace. There's a discipline to silence that takes practice. At first, it feels unnatural, like you're letting people win or walk all over you. But over time, you learn that silence is not about losing, it's about letting go of battles that do not matter. You begin to feel the power in saying nothing when every part of you wants to speak. You discover that not reacting can be louder than shouting, that holding your tongue can be an act of self-respect. You start to value the weight of your words enough to stop throwing them into black holes where they will never be understood. Silence also deepens your self-awareness. When you stop rushing to respond, you give yourself time to think. You begin to notice your own triggers, your emotional patterns, the places where you still feel the need to defend your worth. Silence forces you to confront the truth about why certain things get under your skin. And in that reflection, you learn where your healing still needs work. You realize that most of the time, the person you're trying to convince is not the other person, it's yourself. Silence then becomes not just a boundary, but a tool for growth. Finally, silence leaves space for dignity. There is a quiet grace in not needing the last word. It's a reminder that your worth is not determined by how well you can argue, but by how deeply you can live without the need for constant validation. You start to see that silence doesn't erase you, it elevates you. It keeps you from becoming tangled in things beneath you. It allows you to walk away with your head high, knowing that your self-respect stayed intact. And in a world obsessed with noise, choosing silence is one of the loudest statements you will ever make. Every day you wake up with a limited amount of energy. It's the unseen currency that fuels your thoughts, emotions, and actions. But unlike money, you can't earn more of it instantly. Once it's spent, it's gone until you rest and recharge. And yet, many of us spend our energy recklessly, giving it away to arguments we didn't start, to people we don't trust, to situations that have no real impact on our growth. When you start to see your energy as a currency, you become more intentional about where it goes. You stop pouring it into things that only drain you, and you start investing it in things that return value to your life. One of the first shifts that happens when you treat your energy like currency is that you stop showing up everywhere you're invited. Not every call for your attention deserves an answer, and not every person who demands your time deserves your presence. When you try to be everywhere for everyone, you dilute yourself. You're spread so thin that you can't give your best to the things and people that truly matter. Learning to say no is one of the most powerful ways to protect your energy. It's not rejection. It's redirection. It's choosing to preserve your strength for the spaces that honor and appreciate it. We often forget that every emotional interaction has a cost. When you argue with someone who refuses to hear you, that's energy spent. When you try to change someone who's committed to staying the same, that's energy spent. When you replay a conversation over and over in your head, wishing you had said something different, that's energy spent. The more you give to these draining cycles, the less you have for the things that bring you joy, peace, and purpose. Disappearing from certain situations is not about avoidance. It's about closing the leak before your emotional account runs dry. Spending your energy wisely also means recognizing where it naturally multiplies. There are people and places that leave you feeling lighter, stronger, and more alive. Conversations where you feel heard, moments where you feel safe, work that fills you instead of empties you, these are the investments that grow your internal wealth. When you focus your energy on these areas, you not only protect your emotional health, but you also expand it. You begin to see your life not as a series of obligations, but as a portfolio of intentional choices that shape who you are becoming. It's also important to remember that not every transaction needs to be made. Just because you have energy doesn't mean you should spend it. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to hold back, to save your strength for when it will truly matter. That restraint can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to giving and giving without limits. But over time, you realize that being selective with your energy isn't selfish. It's sustainable. You can't keep withdrawing from yourself without making deposits back in. Rest, solitude, and meaningful connection are those deposits. When you begin to treat your energy as the precious currency it is, everything in your life changes. You stop chasing validation from people who were never going to give it. You stop exhausting yourself trying to fix situations that were never yours to fix. You stop performing for an audience that doesn't even care. Instead, you become deliberate. You choose your battles, your commitments, and your companions with intention. And in doing so, you build a life that feels less like survival and more like freedom, because you've finally stopped spending your energy on what breaks you and started investing it in what builds you. Healing is not something you can rush, force, or schedule into your life like an appointment. It unfolds in its own time, in its own way, and it needs space to do so. Yet, so many of us try to heal in the same environments that hurt us, surrounded by the same dynamics that broke us. We tell ourselves we can handle it, that we're strong enough to stay, but healing is not about proving strength. It's about protecting your wholeness while it's still fragile. And sometimes that means disappearing from the people, places, and conversations that keep reopening wounds you're trying to close. When you step away from the environments that keep you in survival mode, you give your nervous system a chance to exhale. The constant tension in your shoulders starts to ease. Your mind becomes less frantic. You begin to notice moments of quiet joy, things you couldn't see before because your focus was on managing chaos. This kind of space isn't just physical, it's emotional, mental, and spiritual. It's the space to process without being interrupted, to feel without being judged, and to rest without being rushed back into the noise. Space also allows clarity to emerge. When you're constantly surrounded by the same patterns, you can't see them clearly. It's like standing too close to a painting. You only see a blur of colors. Stepping back gives you perspective. You start to recognize the ways you've been minimizing your pain, the times you've accepted less than you deserved, and the cycles you've been unknowingly repeating. That clarity is uncomfortable at first, but it's also the beginning of a real transformation. You can't change what you refuse to see. Healing space is not always understood by others. People may accuse you of being distant, cold, or selfish. They may try to pull you back into old roles because your absence disrupts the balance they're used to. But you have to remember, this space is not for them, it's for you. It's the ground where you will rebuild your strength, piece by piece, without the pressure to perform or explain. You're not shutting people out to punish them. You're creating a boundary that keeps you safe enough to grow. One of the most powerful parts of creating healing space is learning to sit with yourself. At first, it can feel lonely, especially if you've spent most of your life surrounded by noise and movement. But over time, you begin to realize that solitude isn't the same as isolation. In solitude, you start to hear your own voice again. You reconnect with the parts of yourself that got buried under obligations, expectations, and pain. You remember what it feels like to trust yourself, to believe in your own decisions, to be at home in your own company. And then something shifts. You stop craving constant distraction. The silence no longer feels heavy. The stillness no longer feels threatening. You start to value the space you've created because it has become the soil where your healing is taking root. It's in this space that you begin to grow into someone who no longer feels the need to return to what broke you. You start to understand that healing is not about going back. It's about moving forward into something better. And you can only do that if you give yourself the room to truly become whole again. We grow up believing that kindness means being available to everyone. We're told to answer every call, open every door, give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And while compassion is a beautiful trait, it becomes dangerous when it comes without boundaries. The truth is, not everyone who wants access to you should have it. Some people seek connection only to take, drain, or manipulate. They're not looking for your friendship. They're looking for your resources, your time, your emotional energy, your attention. Learning to limit access isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. When you allow everyone into your life without discernment, you hand out pieces of yourself like they're endless. But you are not infinite. You are a human being with limits. And every relationship you maintain costs something. Some people deposit into your life. They listen, they uplift, they reciprocate. Others only withdraw, leaving you with emotional overdrafts you never agreed to. Disappearing from the spaces and relationships that consistently deplete you is not abandonment. It's the conscious choice to protect what is sacred inside you. Boundaries aren't walls to keep the world out. They're gates that decide who gets to come in. A wall is about fear. A gate is about value. You don't deny entry to punish people. You limit entry because you understand the worth of what's inside. Your trust, your attention, and your love are not cheap commodities. They are rare and valuable, and not everyone has earned the right to experience them. When you treat your presence as a privilege rather than an obligation, you shift the entire dynamic of your relationships. Of course, setting these boundaries will make some people uncomfortable, especially those who benefited from your lack of them. They may call you selfish, distant, or arrogant. They may try to guilt you into returning to the old patterns that kept you available at your own expense. But here's the thing, their discomfort is not your problem to fix. The people meant for you will respect your limits. They will value your time instead of taking it for granted. They will recognize that your no is not rejection. It's a sign of self-awareness and self-worth. Limiting access also allows you to give more fully to the right people. When you're not stretched thin trying to be everything to everyone, you have more energy, time, and presence for the relationships that truly matter. You can listen deeply. You can show up with intention. You can nurture connections that are built on mutual respect instead of one-sided sacrifice. Protecting your space doesn't make you less loving. It makes your love more powerful because it's given freely, not out of obligation. And perhaps most importantly, controlling access to yourself teaches you something profound. You don't need to be available to be valuable. Your worth is not measured by your accessibility. You can step back, disappear for a while, and still matter. You can remove yourself from the constant demands of others and still be deeply loved by the right ones. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to be cherished. And that begins the moment you decide that your life is not a public park. It's a private garden, and only those who respect it get to walk inside. Disappearing isn't the end of your story. It's the chapter where the real transformation happens. People often misunderstand this part. They think that stepping away means you've quit, that you've chosen to fade into the background. But disappearing isn't about erasing yourself. It's about rewriting yourself. It's a period of incubation where you allow yourself to grow in the dark, away from the noise, until you are ready to emerge as something new. Just like seeds need to be buried before they bloom, you too may need to disappear before you can rise. When you step back, you're not abandoning the world. You're reclaiming your energy, your focus, and your voice. It's in the absence of constant performance that you discover what you truly want. Without the endless stream of opinions, you can hear your own thoughts. Without the weight of expectations, you can move at your own pace. This is where you find your footing again, where you gather the strength to return. Not as the version of you shaped by other people's needs, but as the version of you that feels most authentic. Time away also reveals who and what is worth your return. When you disappear, you learn a lot about people. The ones who truly value you will respect your space and still be there when you come back. The ones who only valued your availability will quietly disappear themselves. This is one of the gifts of retreat. It naturally filters your relationships. You stop guessing who's genuine and who's not because their actions during your absence make it clear. And this clarity is power. Disappearing gives you the room to build without interference. Growth often requires privacy because not everyone will understand the changes you're making. Some will criticize, some will doubt, and some will try to pull you back into old versions of yourself. But when you're out of sight, you're out of reach of those voices, You can take risks without an audience. You can fail without shame, and you can rebuild without the constant need to justify yourself. The work you do in this hidden space becomes the foundation for your strength. And when you do reappear, you return on your own terms. You are not coming back to prove something, you're coming back to live something. You'll speak differently, stand differently, and move differently because the time you spent away has reshaped you. The same situations that once triggered you will no longer have power over you. The same patterns that once trapped you will no longer tempt you. You'll find that disappearing didn't just protect you, it transformed you. The beauty of this process is that you no longer fear disappearing again. Once you've experienced the power of stepping away and returning stronger, you understand that retreat is not failure. It's a tool. You can use it whenever you need to reset, heal, or realign. It becomes part of your rhythm, part of your self-care, part of your strength. And in a world that constantly demands you stay visible, choosing to disappear and then reappear on your own terms is one of the most radical acts of self-empowerment you can make. So if you feel the pull to step back, listen to it. If your soul is whispering for distance, honor it. Disappearing is not running away. It's running toward yourself. It's choosing to break free from the noise, from the constant demands, from the invisible weight of expectations you never agreed to carry. It's creating room for your healing, for your strength, for the version of you that doesn't need to fight for a place in rooms that were never meant for you. One day, the people who once questioned your absence will see the difference in your presence. They will notice the calm in your voice, the steadiness in your steps, the clarity in your eyes. They will see that you didn't vanish to hide, you vanished to grow. And when you reappeared, you were not the same person who left. You were sharper, freer, and more grounded in your truth. Because disappearing is not an ending. It's a beginning. It's the door. You close on everything that was breaking you, and the door you open to the life you've been quietly building in the dark. And when you step back into the light, you'll know without a doubt you didn't lose yourself when you disappeared. You finally found yourself,